So recently, Jordan Peterson was on a news broadcast discussing how ideals necessarily create margins because not everyone will fit into that ideal.
Look, every category has an ideal at the center and a margin at the fringe. And if the center is destroyed, the margin will be demolished as well. Now, the radicals think that you can bring the margin to the center, but that's preposterous because a margin is a plurality. And if you bring the plurality to the center, you demolish everything. You demolish the category. Well, look, if you have the nuclear family as the minimal ideal, obviously you simultaneously exclude to some degree those people who aren't in that constellation. But if you destroy the constellation itself, everyone disappears. So I'll give you an example. So we had LGB and then we had LGBT. Well, now the T is destroying the L and the G. And the reason for that is that the margin will devour itself. And so it might be the case that my pro-family stance marginalizes, but it's even more the case that the stance that says any old thing goes destroys absolutely everything. And you're naive to think that that's not the case. And I think that what's happening, 80% of the kids who undergo, at least before this recent explosive epidemic, on the female side, 80% of the kids who are undergoing gender transformation surgery unnecessarily are gay. Right. Well, that's a classic, stellar example of what happens when the margin takes the center. The margin can't take the center. Now, so that brings up a real problem, which the leftists point out to, is like, how do you have a category, say with the family, the nuclear family as the minimal ideal, without being prejudiced against other people? And it's something like an informed and humble tolerance.
It's funny, I could not help but think of how the church sets ideals in the family proclamation, but also includes an informed, humble tolerance that goes something like this.
Disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation.
You know, like there's divorce in my immediate family, you know, and certainly in my extended family. My sister's being divorced, my brother's being divorced, my daughter's being divorced. Every family has people in it who are single or who are widowed or who are in gay relationships. I mean, the family is an ideal that's breached more than it's adhered to, but that doesn't mean you get to sacrifice the ideal. No. The ideal still has to stay. And then we have to live with the tension between the ideal and the fragments that surround it that actually make up, well, even if you're in a dedicated marriage. I mean, there's been times in my marriage with my wife where our relationship was very tense. And so we moved away from the ideal, but you don't throw out the ideal just because it's difficult to attain and because it excludes what's not ideal, because then you destroy everything. If you have no ideal, there's nothing to work for. And the notion that we can somehow move beyond the minimal nuclear family, I just don't think there's any evidence for that whatsoever. And I would also say that when contemplating that, we might want to look at those who are truly the most vulnerable and victimized, and the ones who are most vulnerable and victimized by the breakdown of the nuclear family are 100% children. It's plain and absolutely simple. Children without fathers, for example, do way worse. And that if the evidence that's been accrued on that side isn't convincing to you, then no evidence about anything ever would be convincing about anything.
Although the alternative view to that would be that you are stigmatizing single mothers by saying that, because actually you could have an extremely...
I am stigmatizing single mothers.
Is that a problem, though, if you have a strong and empowered woman who is bringing up a family in the absence of a father who actually maybe their absence is welcome, maybe the dad wasn't a good influence? You'd arguably be better off with the strong mother than two weak parents.
Well, there's obviously exceptional cases where the exception is the preferable alternative.
Yeah.
Obviously. Well, that's the decision that people make when they get divorced. You know, most people who get divorced aren't happy with it, but they accept the broken marriage as the reality that's preferable to the continuation of the relationship. And I've certainly had couples, for example, or people in my clinical practice for whom the divorce was clearly the right alternative. And they were married to people who were narcissistically psychopathic, who were making their lives absolute hell. But that doesn't mean that you get to escape from the ideal without the price of stigmatization. You can do a good job as a single mother, but that doesn't make it an ideal. Certainly not a societal ideal.
You mentioned.
Amen. You see, our church has a very particular mission.
As we describe the nature and requirements of each of the three kingdoms in the Father's plan, we begin with the highest, which is the focus of the divine commandments and ordinances God has revealed through the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints focuses on these because the purpose of this restored church is to prepare God's children for salvation in the celestial glory, and more particularly for exaltation in its highest degree. God's plan, founded on eternal truth, requires that exaltation can be attained only through faithfulness to the covenants of an eternal marriage between a man and a woman in the holy temple, which marriage will ultimately be available to all the faithful. That is why we teach that, quote, gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose.
You see, our church exists to teach people what the ideal is and what we might call the celestial order of being, and to encourage people to strive to live up to that ideal. That is what the Family Proclamation is doing. Yes, talking about ideals will bring to us an awareness of the many ways that we fall short of that ideal. But does that mean that we should abandon the ideal and simply say that anything goes? No. So what we are left with is a situation in which there exists a moral order or law that we all fall hopelessly short of over and over again. And this is the fallen state that we find ourselves in. But that is exactly why the good news, the gospel, begins to speak to us. Because there is hope, and He is the way, and that's where we place our faith. So do you enjoy the content here on Thoughtful Faith? If so, be sure to hit the notification bell. This ensures that our new videos show up on your feed. Also, be sure to check out our Facebook group called Thoughtful Saints, where myself and others discuss the sorts of topics found on this channel. And lastly, if you think other people would benefit from this video, please be sure to share it.